set. Welcome to the Coastside Fire Protection District Board of Directors Special Board Meeting, December 9th, 2020. Roll call, please, Jane.
Secretary McShane,
Present.
Director Stockman.
He's muted.
Sam,
Sorry,
somebody
here.
get him. Hi, it's Steve.
Hi.
Director McKimmy,
Here, at home.
Vice President Cockrell,
Here.
President Burke,
Yes, here.
Ian McKinnon, Chief Larkin, sorry.
I'm here. Thank you.
Jonathan Cox, Deputy Chief Cox. And you said that Gene Savory is going to be a little late.
Yep.
Very good.
And myself. Is anybody at the station or is everybody remote everywhere else?
Everyone,
Okay, we're remote.
is Chief
We
Simpson?
Hey, we've got through the tough
Sampson.
part. Now we'll go to
How
the
about
meeting.
Chief Sampson? I see Chief Sampson's there. Or
He's
online.
muted.
He'll be
I'm on.
introduced in a minute. Okay,
Okay.
all right. Please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I'll open a public comment for time for the public to make comments. I believe we have somebody.
No, but
Sid Young, are you there?
yeah, I can't see the raise hand button, but you saw I was there. So did anybody get the letter I emailed? I just found out from Ginny that I sent them to the wrong email addresses.
Yes,
I got the letter.
Okay.
yes.
Oh, I just
I
want to know
did.
if they got it. Okay, good. Because I didn't get it in time to get it on the agenda. So basically, I've been on a lot of Zoom meetings this week. The Coastside Inn got sold. Keaton Erhan owned it at 230 Cabrillo Highway. The county bought it. They're going to put homeless people in there, and they're not going to be paying any more property taxes because they're exempt. So I kind of thought, well, that's probably going to create, a lot of issues for our local people that bill their rates, fees and stuff through the property tax bill. But also with the county putting homeless people in there might be more service calls there. I've worked in the city a long time, and some of the homeless people are challenging, shall we say. So I guess you guys are all trained up on how to deal with drug overdoses and psychic episodes, but you might be getting more calls at that location, and you won't be compensated by the fire department assessment anymore. So that was one thing. I think Half Moon Bay's losing all their TOT tax, and they're going to work out an MOU or something with the county. So that might be something. If you see you get started getting a lot of calls there, you might want to look into that. So second, today the Planning Commission had the Chevron station on, and also I think they've approved with some conditions the 48 parking spot RV park at Capistrano and Highway 1, which is one stoplight down from the beautiful new station that you guys have. Anyway, I like to go to Mezzaluna, Cafe Mezzaluna, to get a cup of coffee, but he has locked that back gate. So I don't know if that's a fire code violation or not, or the food truck that seems to park right next to the fire hydrant on the corner of Highway 1 in Moss Beach. But it might be worth a site visit, just because, I'm thinking of public safety more than anything else. And that's it. That's all I wanted to say. And congratulations on that station. It is so beautiful. And I really wish we could have had a live ribbon cutting. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sid. We
Thanks,
will
Sid.
have a live
Okay.
ribbon cutting at some point in the future, I'm sure.
Well, maybe you want the
just
picture
to-
of us getting the Keep Cal Fire signatures and putting them in. I put it in on the letter with John Lynch. That's the day we delivered those signatures to the county elections department to be able to get the recall on the ballot. So that was in the letter I sent too. Thanks.
Right on.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Sid.
Sure, thank you.
President Burke, I just want to acknowledge Sid Young for all the work she did in helping us secure Cal Fire. Did a marvelous job on the recall.
It was kind of a fight, but JB knows there were some issues with some of the recall people.
Let's
Didn't
put it
even
mildly.
fighting with us, but I've got to hide like an armadillo, so whatever. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Sid.
Sure, I may hang out for the meeting. Bye, I see Bruce waving. Bye.
Yep. See you, Sid.
Yeah, I'm gonna be in, but I'm gonna mute myself.
Okay, cool.
Or do I
You're
have?
a welcome asset.
For the sake of the board members, I had discussed the issue of the homeless shelter with the fire chief, and the conclusion from both of us was that it would not present any undue either operational or financial difficulties to the board. With that, I'll move on to the consent calendar, and I will make a motion to approve the consent calendar. And Bruce, do you have to?
I do not know, so I'm going to recuse myself anyway, just to be on the safe side.
All right, Bruce will recuse himself, and I make a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
Moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. Roll call, please, Jean.
Secretary McShane,
Yes.
Director Stockman,
Yes.
Timmy, who recused, Vice President Cockrell,
Yes.
and President Burke.
Yes.
Passes 4-0,
Just for
1
this-
by roll call.
Just for the sake of the public, I just note that in the consent calendar is a list of all the checks that the district has and payments that the district has made here in the last month and a half. And all that information is available to the public. Moving on to item F, continuing business presentation by Division Chief Rich Sampson. Chief Cox. Are you going to introduce Chief Sampson?
Yeah, thank you, President Burke. Just want to introduce Rich Sampson. I know we've conversation over the last few months about the vegetation management on the Coastside, and it was at the request of the president to bring in Rich Sampson. Rich, Division Chief of Resource Management and Law Enforcement for the unit. He oversees all of our foresters, all of the state lands, as well as all of the law enforcement for the unit. Rich is a valued and extremely highly expertised person for the unit, and we're very fortunate to have him, his skills, and more importantly, his connections with all the landowners and cooperators in this area. And he is the go-to de facto expert when it comes to vegetation management, both from a planning and an implementation phase. And I think it'll be enlightening to hear what he does unit-wide and how it impacts the district. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Rich.
Welcome, Chief Sampson.
Thanks for having me. Let me see if I can get my screen to share, and I'll get the PowerPoint going.
Cool.
Are you packing heat tonight?
You got to be careful out in the forest with those pumas.
Go ahead, Chief Sampson.
Okay, do you have the full PowerPoint, or is it a?
Still looking at you, babe.
Okay, we will try this again. It might be good in the woods, but I don't know about this computer stuff.
It's all fair.
All right, let's try it the other way. And that.
Uh-oh.
Something
That's
good
not good.
I think
What's happening? There it is.
nicely done, Chief.
There it is.
All right, does it say, is it the PowerPoint, or is it a Zoom screen?
Fire danger on the San Mateo
Looks
coastline.
good.
So now my VCR is blinking 12.
But mine says Debbie does who? What?
There we go. Okay,
Go ahead.
so this is a altered version of the same presentation that we did for MCC. I've added a few slides and changed it to make it more for Coastside Fire Protection District.
Cool.
This map is a map showing the fire history, the fire perimeters pre-2005. There's a lot more fires that could possibly be on this. We just don't have the records, and some of them we don't have the perimeters. And that's where I just have it shown, but it gives you an idea pre-2005 what we were looking at least for the coast side. The unit used to be known as the asbestos
Forest.
unit. People were under the impression that it never burned here. Well, we've kind of proven that wrong. Here's another the next version for the next 5 years. Prior to 2020, we had a few more fires added in. Most notably, some more up in the Santa Cruz Mountains, up in the Santa Clara area. And then we had the Lockheed fire, which we thought that was the biggest fire we were going to see. That was 8,000 acres. Well, here's what happened this year. This is 85,000 acres for the Lightning Complex, and then almost 400,000 acres over in Santa Clara. And as far as I can tell, we're probably not going to see too much for the next couple of years. We're going to see some more of these. 2020, 9,600 wildfires for the state, 4.1 million acres were burned. Over 10,000 structures were destroyed, and we had 31 fatalities this year. The last big year was 2018. In that case, we had 7,500 fires, 1.8 million acres, and 22,700 structures, and a lot more fatalities. So we burned a lot more acres, we had a lot more fires, but we frankly got lucky on the structures, and we got lucky on the fatalities, relatively speaking. So what's different? And these photos are for the fire down in the CZU. This is from south of Pescadero towards the fires. Well, basically, we've had a huge influx of residents into areas that were previously unoccupied. Basically, it was vacant land. A lot of watersheds that nobody lived in. Now we have subdivisions that are out in those vacant lands, and that's changed how we have to fight fire. The population has increased on the coast side significantly over the last 100 years, and really over the last 50 years. Whether you believe it or not, in my opinion, we've got climate change. It's hotter, it's drier, and we're gonna have longer fire seasons. We're already seeing longer fire seasons. Before, fire season really didn't start till August, and it was over by the end of October. Now we're starting fire season back in June or earlier, and it's not ending. Well, we're still not out of fire season now. We're probably not going to go out of peak until toward the end of the month. We've had about 100 years of heavy fire suppression efforts. What that means is we actively engage pretty much every fire and try to put it out. Good and bad. The good is that we put the fires out. The bad is we put the fires out that may have gone through and reduced the fire hazard into the future. So that's something that we've got to look at more and hopefully change. There's been a significant fuel load increase because of the above, all of that, because of climate change, the suppression efforts, the influx of the population, and the housing. We have a different fuel load than we had 100 years ago. Big fires have happened before. Numbers of fires have happened before. This is a article from the San Mateo Times of 1929. Note, this is a fire in November. And when you get into the article, they start talking about recruiting 100 men off of highways and ranches and out of the cities. Basically, that was the firefighting force. They were recruited just for the fire. No training, just, hey, here's a shovel, go put it out. November with 50-mile-an-hour winds. Does that sound familiar? So, and we had 6 fires at one time in Santa Cruz, in San Mateo County. So what we had this year wasn't completely out of order. The other thing are the vegetation changes. We're looking at sudden oak death. Has that's been huge changes in the forest. A lot more dead fuel. Sudden oak death is something that we see more after we see heavy winters. So after last winter, we had a big influx of sudden oak death, taking out a lot of the forest, making a lot more mortality, a lot more down heavy fuels. We also have a lot more overstocked dense forest. This is a picture of a Douglas fir stand down south in the southern San Mateo County. Douglas fir on the coast is more of a transition species. It comes in, fires come through, knock it out, just like pine. Redwood is what stays in there the longest. And so it's not set up to make stands like this. Usually a fire comes through and knocks it back, so we don't have a dense stand like the one over here in the lower right. Then we have other species coming in. Other species like tan oak, bay, manzanita, different species coming through a forest in San Mateo County that have different fuel loads, different burning patterns. Climate change effects. The biggest thing is the wind. Yes, it's hotter, it's drier, longer fire seasons, but we're seeing the wind events that may have happened once or twice a year. There seem to be happening more. And because of the different climate change factors, they're getting faster, they're getting drier, and with more energy in them. The picture of that pipe wrapped around the tree, that's a picture was taken in Redding after the car fire, where they clocked 149 mile an hour winds. That's a class 5 tornado. That was a water pipe out of a structure that blew and hit that tree and just wrapped around it. We do see winds like that. We didn't see winds like that on the this summer's fire. They really didn't peak out. They peaked out around 55 miles an hour, but it's possible around the state. North wind events are what we're looking at as being the creating the high intensity fires. And by that, I mean, is this picture right here. North wind event is something where you're going to have high winds coming out of dry area, i.e. the Central Valley, the high desert, blowing south, high pressure areas that are formed, going to lower pressure areas. As these north winds blow, they go from high elevation to low elevation, which speeds up the wind and also dries it out as it drops the moisture and also increases the temperature. That's why you're seeing wind events where it's warmer in Half Moon Bay than it is in San Mateo. When you have those and when the winds line up along topography, i.e. on ridges, you're going to have events like we saw on the lightning fire this summer. Things were just separate fires until day 3, when the winds and the temperatures and the humidities all lined up, and all of a sudden all the fires came together and just blew straight to the south. That was a north wind event. In this case, and we've seen some of this before, where you have a fire that would catch up, say up in the watershed, maybe up over toward Pacifica. If it got set, if it was able to go ahead and hold and get into a wind event, that wind event would blow it south, down the mountain, basically possibly through either one of the mini uke stands in the town. That's kind of what we saw in the 50s event, where the last time the uke grove burned up in El Granado. There we were getting embers down in downtown Half Moon Bay. So our new reality, more population, more infrastructure in the wildland. Used to be vacant land. When it was vacant land, you just let it burn and you catch it on the other side. Now we have to go into that, what used to be vacant land, and protect those structures and get the people out. Fuels are drier, denser, and warmer. That means they burn hotter and burn quicker. We can't keep ahead of these growth rates with what we've done in the past. These growth rates are not slowing down, and we have to somehow figure out how we're going to manage these growth rates of both the fuel, but also the population. And the resource levels that we used before just aren't working, or we have to get more realistic on how we fight fire and treat fuels. Right now, we have to aggressively fight every fire. That's just the way it is. We also have to aggressively fight every time we want to have a prescribed fire. That's a problem. People are really pushing to do prescribed fires, but reality is it's hard to pull one of those off because of a lot of restrictions, a lot of misconceptions about prescribed fire. The other part is the reality is we're constantly, the board's getting it, the agencies are getting it, the concept of we have to do something. They don't know what that something is, but we have to do it. And running with that creates issues. That's when we make mistakes by trying to act too fast without planning things out properly. Let's look at our vegetations. The vegetation we should have on the coast side. Coastal chaparral, that's the upper picture, is the standard vegetation we should be seeing on our hillsides. The lower picture with the eucalyptus cropping up, that's not natural. On these thin soils that we have up here, we really should not have these tall trees, these tall forests. The soils, the moisture in the soils, they don't really support it very well. They really support the chaparral. The other part is the chaparral is a lot healthier. It can be denser, but it doesn't have the fuel loads that you see in some of the other vegetation that are brought in. It's a lot easier to manage and it's self-sustaining. Eucalyptus, large trees, dense canopies, exotic species. There were what, 400 species of eucalyptus, and they decided to bring several over because they had certain desirable traits. Well, unfortunately, the 3 species they brought over weren't the 3 species that they thought. So we got the wrong ones and we got what we got. They had the leaves on these, the globulus, the bigger ones that that's predominant around the coast side. Those leaves produce highly flammable oils. They also shed prolifically. They make very deep duff layers. If you go into a redwood forest or an oak forest, the duff layer, the leaves and the needles on the ground, they may be 2 inches deep, maybe 4 inches. 2 feet is not very deep for a eucalyptus stand. I've seen duff layers up to 6 feet. Part of the problem is the leaves that are being, the chemicals that are produced from the leaves create the phenolics in that chemical prevent fungus from forming in the duff layer. And that fungus is needed to break down the duff layer. So basically it sterilizes the duff layer so there's nothing to break it down. The windrows that were planted in the early 1900s, they were planted to have fuel, but also protect some of the farmlands from the high winds that they were seeing. But unfortunately, we're seeing on the average about 1 foot radial growth of those stands. So a stand that was 50 feet wide 100 years ago is going to be 100 foot wider now in all directions. Dense stands of large diameter trees are very expensive to control. What do you do with all that material? One of those, 40-inch diameter eucalyptus trees has more mass in it than most houses do. And it's heavy, and there's a lot of infrastructure built into some of these forests. It's not easy to log those stands and try to remove that material. Plus, then what are you going to do with the material? The good news is once you do clear those stands, after about 6 months, those chemicals that are coming out of those leaves break down and it doesn't sterilize the duff anymore. And it allows the vegetation, the native vegetation that's still in the ground to recover and start popping back up. You'll see that in Quarry Park now in the areas that they were working in a year and a half ago, where you're seeing the oaks and the coffee berries starting to pop back up through the chip layers. Plus, if you look at it for habitat, for wildlife, it's not a very diverse habitat. It's actually seems kind of sterile. Here's a stand in Quarry Park before they did the treatment. Not a very healthy looking stand, but can you imagine that on fire? Looking at this stand, and let's see if I can actually get my cursor to work. Are you seeing my cursor going back and forth? Here's the Quarry Park stand. Here's eucalyptus.
We're not seeing it.
You're not seeing it?
No.
Okay. Basically, I was trying to show with this slide the number of eucalyptus stands and how much eucalyptus is on this coast side. I would say
So
at least 10% of the ground cover on the coast side is in eucalyptus.
So that darker spot is the uke, right?
The darker spot above the harbor is Quarry Park.
Okay,
And
that's
as you go down the
eucalyptus.
coast, you're going to see coming out of some of those canyons and then along 92,
Sure.
several more of those stands as they show up going across. Once you go to the west and drop over the hill towards Crystal Springs, the dark stuff is the Douglas fir.
Correct.
Here's an
There
old
we go.
aerial photo from 28 compared to Google in 2018 of the same image looking at El Granada and Quarry Park. It was a lot
Wow.
thinner, but also a lot fewer residences. The stand has completely taken over that hillside and has expanded well beyond what was planted.
Right.
Different methods of removing it. Well, here's some mechanical methods. You can go out just by hand, start cutting it down, but with the amount of eucalyptus we're looking at on the coast side, the only way we're going to be able to deal with this is going large. You just can't get ahead of it. The upper picture shows the equipment that was used in Quarry Park in 2019. Those are large, what we call masticators, track vehicles. They can go up to about a 40% slope. They essentially have what's essentially a chipper at the front of the equipment, and it just chews up the material and throws it out as chips right on the ground around it. The good thing about that, it's erosion control on these soils that we have here, which are actually very erosive. The lower picture shows a section in Wonderlick Park from last year also, which was a 16-acre project that PG&E did with county parks. They cleared 16 acres of dense eucalyptus, turned it all into wood chips. So what you're seeing there is a 14-inch thick mat of eucalyptus on the ground. After about 6 inches of rain, that dropped to about 8 inches. Problem is it's very expensive. The upper picture, that's about $4,000 the acre to treat. And that wasn't full removal, that's thinning. The lower one, depending on what you're doing and how you do it and what you have on for add-ons, can be anywhere between 40 and 120,000 to the acre. Other issues that you're going to have are the different coastal rules. Right now, we could not do the lower project on the coast side because of the current rules. Wonderlick is not on the coast side, so we didn't have that same restriction. Grants can be used to start this, but you're not going to do this. You're not going to be able to complete the project with grants. Who is responsible in the end? Keep in mind, a lot of this is occurring on private land. It's the landowner's responsibility. Having the government come in and do this project on private land, that's kind of questionable. Other species, pine. Yes, pine is native to the coast side, but not everywhere that you see it on the coast side. And not all the species of pine that you're seeing are the native Monterey pine. There's a lot of mixes out there. Pine is fire adapted, but it's also not a very long-lived species. Average pine should only last about 40 years before fire comes through and starts regenerating the stand. So that's why you see a lot of mortality in the pine around some of these subdivisions and even up in the Quarry Park area. As it has been told to me in the past, the Monterey pine is the tree surgeon's retirement fund. Everyone used to be about 2,000 to drop after 20 years. So you plant that pine in 20 years, you're going to get somebody out there to cut it down. Now it costs a lot more than $2,000. Very flammable. The canopy torches out. And when you see the lower picture, you can see trees torching out. And that's a picture further south on the coast side. Very susceptible to disease. Cankers and also bug kill. So
Through the
pine.
chair, I
may
see
not
that
be
Gene
favorite
Savory is on us.
to put in your backyard.
Through the chair, I see that Gene Savory has joined us.
Thank you.
It looks like she might be muted. I'm not sure.
So to
Okay.
counter this, we got to be realistic about what we're defending. A fire like last summer's the lightning complex, after day 3, when it really took off, we don't have the resources, nobody has the resources to stop a fire like that once it gets going. Once the conditions are all lined up, you got the wind, you have the humidities, you have the fuel, you have the topography. Unless something is eliminated in that triangle, that fire is going to go, and all you can do is get out of its way and get everybody else out of its way until one of the factors drops out, i.e. probably the wind. Once the wind dies down, it comes back down on the ground, and we can go ahead and start protecting. So that means when you're doing your defensible space work and you're doing all the fuel reduction work, you're probably not going to be able to stop those fires with your projects. The good news is, out of the 9,600 fires that we had this summer, only about 15 to 20 of them were that type of fire. So basically 1/100th of the fires that we had are those type of fires. The rest of those fires, the other 9,600 or 9,570 or so, we can defend against. And you can do your defensible space, you can do your shaded fuel breaks, and they'll be effective on that. And we did see during the fires last summer how that worked. Some of the shady fuel breaks we put in actually worked. The problem is the fire burned around them and came in from the other side and took out the structure. So we have to be realistic that we are not going to stop those type of fires as they continue, but we're going to try to do our best and save for the rest of them. We need to work on defensible space. Evacuation plans, we've already worked on. Chief Cox will talk more about that. Temporary refuge areas, areas where we have so many people trying to evacuate so quickly that the evacuation routes are overwhelmed or they just are blocked. We need refuge areas where they can go and shelter till the fire goes through and you can get the evacuation routes open again and get them out. Areas like the airport or some large area that they can go and shelter at. Plus, we have to maintain all the above. You put your defensible space in, you make your evacuations route, you get them cleared, you're going to probably have to do maintenance probably at least every 3 years to make them remain effective. So it's a long-term effort that's going to be very expensive, but it's just maintenance. Keep in mind, it took us over 100 years to get into this condition. It's going to take us a while to get out. It's not going to be a short-term fix. We also have to change how we're looking at vegetation. Back in the 80s, when they were harvesting eucalyptus out of Quarry Park for the private, there were protests against cutting the eucalyptus trees. We've kind of changed how we're looking at eucalyptus trees now. They want them out. Grants aren't going to solve this. Grants are for pilot projects. This is way beyond a pilot project. We've already done some grants, so we've got to figure out how we're going to make the funding work for this. And back to this is the landowner's responsibility. Quarry Park is public land and the county's working on that. But that's not the majority of the problem across the coastside. The rest of it's private land, and it's ultimately the landowner who bought that property with this hazard on it who really should be taking care of it. The agencies like San Mateo or organizations like San Mateo Fire Safe Council, working with the RCD and other organizations, they've been working the same problem for 32 years. We're now trying to get some traction and getting some support, but we need to keep this thing moving. We need to look at our road systems, otherwise known as evacuation routes. The upper picture is in Montera. Look at the different vegetation types around it. The lower picture is in Butte County of brush burning. But if you have a wind event, if it's dry, and that upper picture has fire going through it, it's going to look similar to the lower picture. Imagine trying to use that evacuation route at night when that's on fire. Probably not going to work too well. This is the same whether it's a public road or a private road. A lot of our restrictions are on, or our ordinances are designed for when we build these roads, not to keep them maintained in this condition. Some of our enforcement isn't to keep it maintained in a clean condition along roads. We've got a lot of rules about defensible space around structures and maintenance of defensible space around structures. We need to start looking at our roads and our evacuation routes to maintain them. especially the private ones. There's a lot of private roads on the coast. Here's a picture of one of our wildland engines on a coastal road. This is what we're asking for, is 10 feet each side of the road and 15 feet tall. Basically, if you had that opening, you could safely move that engine through if it was on fire, but also you could safely try to work from that road if they're trying to fight that fire. But if you're in the vegetation with the equipment, you're not going to get out of that engine and start fighting it. You're just going to try to get out of there. That's why we need roadside vegetation. Chipper programs, very popular program in a lot of different communities. Right now, Fire Safe and RCD are working on a chipper program that we've been doing. We've had some of that working up into the Coastside, into the fire district. There's going to be a lot more of that as the years go by. Essentially, a standard chipper program is where the owner of the residential structure or the property does his defensible space and brings the material out to the edge of the street. And then some company or some organization comes along with a chipper and does works through the neighborhood and chips that material and either hauls it away or preferably leaves those chips on the ground for them to put back on the ground for erosion control. So here's several pictures of different chipping operations going on in this community or in surrounding counties. Fire prevention and defensible space work. Messaging is huge. You're seeing more and more of these fire prevention signs around the county. Might be something we want to do in the district. Defensible space. Look at the design down below is on the lower. That lower picture is showing defensible space, how it should be done out 100 feet. Different zones, the inner 30-foot core zone, the outer 100-foot core zone, looking at thinning in the outer zone. Upper picture showing brush before and after it was cleared around structures. The lower picture showing a community. This would be a community, I believe this was in the campfire area. Here, the houses are gone. The trees are still there, and a couple structures are there. You can see which structures actually had defensible space where that fire was able to go through, and probably that defensible space saved that house, not the fire department. Because when you have large fires, we don't have the resources to put an engine at every structure. If you have 300 fire engines and 6,000 structures to protect, how are you going to work that? That's why defensible spacage is critical. Here's a couple pictures from around the coastside of not so good defensible space. Imagine that picture of that newer structure up above with all that cypress that's going within 3 feet of that structure. All these trees are on the north side, north and west, northwest side of that structure. Where do these high wind events blow from? If those are on fire, that's going to be immediately into that structure. They need to rethink what type of vegetation and where the vegetation is on the property to make it safe. And again, we get a north wind event, we can burn into the flats on the coastside through those subdivisions. We've seen it in Santa Rosa, we've seen it through this campsite fire, we've seen it up in the Paradise Fire. Looking at different tools, you've seen the upper picture with the massacators working. The excavator with a masticator head on the upper right, that is another tool that we're seeing a lot more of on the coast and around the state. Basically, it's a masticator head on the end of a boom on a excavator that basically will take the whole tree down and just turn it into chips on site. Prescribed fire, that's prescribed fire out on the San Francisco watershed with our crews working to burn the grass off of a dam a couple summers ago. Burn piles. Once you get away from the structures and you're out into the wildland and you get on some of the more rough terrain, it's not very cost effective to use the heavy equipment. And we got to get rid of the material. We'll do burn piles. You're going to see more smoke in the air during the winter from some of our prescribed fire, but also from our fuel reduction efforts. We need to get used to that, unfortunately. Heavier equipment, That's where we're going to for the large projects. The chipper on the upper left, that big blue machine, that's one of the ones that was used in Wonderlick Park. You can take a 24-inch diameter tree and run the whole tree through that chipper at once. That's the scale that we're looking at to move the material. It's not cheap. The lower picture below that are the chips that ended up being from several trees that came out the back of it. Looking at track chippers, the upper right photo with excavators, basically taking a chipper, putting it on a piece of on tracks and run it through rough terrain instead of keeping it on the road, where you can bring the chippers through the stand instead of having to bring the stand to the chipper. Trying to make it so we're not having the expense of moving the material out of the forest. That's where we lose time and money. Using heavier equipment, the big green machine down on the lower right, there's actually a cutting saw on the end of that grapple. That's basically a feller buncher. It grabs a tree, the saw on the end of it cuts the tree off and lays it down. But it's heavy equipment to handle the material, the heavy material that we're dealing with for stands like these eucalyptus stands. To wrap this up, we got to continue to encourage defensible space. That's the most cost-effective way of protecting most of these structures through a large majority of the fires that we'll see around this community. We have to expand it to driveways and the perimeters of these properties. We have to encourage with defensible space appropriate landscaping. Putting pampas grass and scotch broom into your, pine into your landscape mix is probably not a good idea anymore, especially as we continue to get drier and drier climate. As a fire district, we need to be working with other agencies on projects and on messaging. We need to be working with county parks. We need to work with GGNRA to talk about how they're doing their projects and work with them on their projects to try to get more bang for our buck to make some of these projects occur. Outreach efforts need to continue. We need to have some messaging, like I was showing those signs, talking about defensive space and expanding this. Talk about appropriate landscaping. Vegetation management and building rule enforcement is key. We can't stop the enforcement once the structure is final. We need to be continuing to make them continue with the defensible space that they have to final the structure on into the life of that structure. We got to change our mindset, because our mindset of how we're dealing with vegetation and fire. These conditions are not going anywhere, not going away soon. We're not going to be able to make this go away with just getting a grant. And that's my presentation.
Chief Sampson, thank you. That was a very complete and very informative presentation. Thank you very much. Board members, as you look at your agenda, Chief Cox in the next presentation is probably going to add some things to this that would be relevant to this presentation. But if there's a couple of questions for Chief Sampson, Bruce, go ahead.
Hey, Rich, a couple of questions or comments. So San Mateo County is so strict on being able to trim or cut trees down. Can we put pressure on them? Or I think you have been, you started to, but I think we need more pressure.
Well, it's not the county themselves, it's the local coastal plan.
Okay.
So it's really in most counties, the county planning department is the enforcement arm, and they do all the work on the ground for the Coastal Commission. The Coastal Commission itself approves some of those plans so that the county planning can actually enact it. Okay. So a lot of the rules that we're dealing with that's making it more difficult is in our local coastal plan, and that's where
okay. Okay, thank you for that. And then at one point, Chief Cox talked about the vegetation in front of New 41, that you had possibly talked about bringing that down to 6 or 8 feet. Is that a possibility?
So that would be looking at maybe even raising it up to 6 feet, trying to make it so there's the understory. Most of the fires in there are going to be a ground fire.
Okay.
And so what you need to do is limit up so that the ground fire can stay underneath. It doesn't take out the whole canopy at one time.
Okay. I was trying to get the boys a view.
Yeah, the view inside of that stand right now might be questionable.
Yeah, because you're looking at tents and some other things.
But I mean, we've had a lot of fires related to those tents in other areas around, and
Sure.
it makes it difficult for us to get in. And basically, they need defensible space around the tents if they're going to stay there.
All right, thanks, Rich.
Chief,
Appreciate it.
Chief Sams, let me make a request. I think I and I think maybe other members of the board are really looking for what can the Coastside Fire Protection District as an organization do to be constructive and impact the things that you've been discussing. And what I would like to ask, not here, but at your leisure, to give us things that you think we might do. And I have in mind, for example, we could get an awful lot more political in terms of helping perhaps other agencies change their policies to the benefit of the Coastside to do that type of thing. Whether there's additional roads that might be helpful that some organizations might not be willing to pursue, or whatever the issue is. I would just like to see a number of things that we could consider and take on, because I think we're looking for what it is we could do to address the situation, and we'd look to you to provide some specific things that we might do. And I hope you'd be very imaginative, because I think I'd like to try to see if we could get some things done. With that,
President Burke,
yes,
I'd like to take a question here.
go ahead.
Give a question. I've been very interested in vegetation management, and I did some preliminary work of just asking people around, and some environmentalists even told me that there's a very, very influential woman in the county, I won't mention her name, who really likes eucalyptus trees because butterflies like them. And that's a true statement. Now, what I want to do, since there's people like Nick Calderon from Parks and Kelly X. Nelson from the San Mateo Resource Conservation District, we have the public's attention at this time because of that massive fire that we went through in 2020. I want to be able to work with you, Rich, pretty closely and follow your direction in working out a plan that our board can help move this problem off the front lines, because it's a major problem, and I worry about El Granada especially.
All right, Ginny, thank you. As I said, Chief Cox is going to have some items I think it might relate to this, but thank you again, Chief Sampson. That was very informative and very helpful. Thank you.
President Burke, I would just ask if you could ask for public comment.
Chief Sampson,
Go ahead.
you hear me, Chief Sampson?
Yes, I do.
Okay, what I'd like to do is in January, I'd like to be able to call you and meet with you and maybe flesh out some ideas on what I can do on vegetation management for this important objective that we're trying to do, because the fires really got the public's attention, and they are sitting straight up in their chairs and they want to help too.
Okay, again, thank you, Chief. And now moving on to continuing business, item B, presentation by
I still had my hand up.
Hey, Director Burke, if we just ask for public comment on that real quick.
I'm sorry, public comment?
Yes, I did hear Chief Sampson's presentation a few times. And at one of the presentations, he mentioned the choke point and on Highway 1 going downhill from the tunnel towards Pacifica. And there's a big eucalyptus grove there, as you probably all know. I don't know, personally, I watched the video from PBS about the Paradise Fire. And ever since then, I've been worried about evacuation. Not that we can all get out of here at once, but I can see we wouldn't be able to get out northbound at all if that grove was on fire. So that would be one thing to Ginny to work on that, getting Caltrans and maybe work with Cal Fire to get that grove a little bit further back from the roadway. I mean, they actually have bicycles going up and down on the edges there, and there's hardly any room because of all the eucalyptus debris on the shoulders of the road. But the other thing is, several years ago, as part of the legislative committee with SAMCAR, we tried to get the San Mateo County tree ordinance changed, and we got nowhere. But they are probably listening now, and I know you guys do weed abatement for people that haven't trimmed their yards or stuff. Maybe you could go around and look and see, especially, boy, I've seen some lots in the back of Montera that are just completely covered with, like that, some of the pictures in Chief Sampson's images of, the sides of the road are covered in strips of eucalyptus bark, and there's trees up and down on the hillsides and stuff. So, I mean, I don't know if you want to cite them or anything, but at least knock on doors or find out who owns the parcel and tell them, you got to clear that lot, or, else something else. But mainly,
Okay.
I asked the county, and I haven't heard anything, of course, but to, instead of making the tree removal permit fee so cost prohibitive, maybe they should, scale it back and work with people who do want to take trees down on their private property, because it's very expensive. Their tree ordinance is quite expensive. And on their meeting, I think it was yesterday, they just voted to, maybe it was today, God, I've been on too many meetings. They raised their permit fees by about 17% effective January 15th. I don't know if it's on the trees, but all their permits are going up through the planning department. So that's another way to try to get through to the county for the unincorporated areas anyway, to, improve the tree removal process and incentivize property owners to remove trees instead of just.
Okay, thank you, Sid. That's
You're
very
welcome.
helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item B, presentation by Deputy Chief Jonathan Cox, rules and responsibilities of agencies and organizations during a large disaster. Chief Cox.
All right, thank you, President Burke. This is really a presentation that you may remember from back 2013. Chief Cole gave a similar presentation to the district, really just talking about disasters in the district, who's responsible for what, and how everything works. And let me just get back to the beginning of the presentation real quick. So just to start things off, a little bit about the disasters, as we all know and have recently lived here in California and the county. Disasters happen anywhere, anytime, any place. We are especially prone just because of the fire zone we live in, but we also have other hazards that we may not give much attention to, but have the potential and will eventually impact portions of the Bay Area, such as large earthquakes, floods, and potentially tsunamis. As a fire district, our mission really here on the coast is to aggressively work to protect the lives, the environment, and the property through the fire protection, suppression, EMS, and rescue actions and public education. That's just a good starting point to think about as a district what we do. We are really response oriented and response focused, with some focus on prevention, but operationally being very much on the response side of a disaster. So how disasters are really coordinated in California come down to the California Emergency Plan, sometimes known as the SEP or the State Emergency Plan. And this is required by law to describe how disasters are dealt with in the state. It goes through everything from how operations are to occur, how mutual aid is to be called for, what agencies' roles are in emergencies, how they're mobilized, how the public's informed, what continuity of government looks like, as well as hazard mitigation, preparation, and recovery. So it's kind of the whole package in one is all based on this California Emergency Plan. And it really is everything at a local level that we do ties in at a state level to what's in place. The California Emergency Plan takes into account all different types of disasters and hazards. That includes terrorism to civil unrest, tsunamis, fires, dam failures, and whatnot. Locally, we may expand or contract our plans based on this, but statewide, we have a plan that really incorporates all sorts of hazards. The starting point and kind of the framework for disasters in California is really looking at the different phases or the life cycle of a disaster. And this is where different agencies plug in. Obviously, preparedness is how we prepare for an emergency, whether that be evacuation planning, having sprinklers, having 911. Those are all things that are preparation. Then there's the response. And as an agency, as a district, we are heavily involved in the response. 99% of what we do is in that response phase of a disaster. But then there's also the recovery phase and the mitigation phase. And those are all part of the cycle of disasters in California, and everyone has a different role in it. As I talked about the emergency plan, the state emergency plan, all the plans below that at an operational area level at the county, at a local level at either a city or a district level, and all the way down to kind of our policies and procedures, all kind of intertwine with that state emergency plan. And that includes functional annexes. It includes kind of standard operating procedures and the way we do business. And the reason that's important is because if I respond to a disaster in Orange County, they need to be doing things similar to the way that we are to make sure that we can mitigate that disaster, whether it be languaging or tools and equipment or the way they structure their command staff in the EOC. There has to be some sort of commonality for a framework statewide, and that's all driven by the state emergency plan that ties in locally. So with this, in California, we are required, or it's all bunched together into what's called the SEMS, the Standardized Emergency Management System. And you'll hear this term a lot, SEMS. And it's really required that when a disaster strikes, the agencies can work together to basically minimize the impacts of it. Now, what SEMS says is that coordination and response in California has to have these principles. Adopted locally and at a county level is because all of our reimbursement, if we were to have a disaster, is all contingent on whether we are a NIMS and SIMS compliant organization, whether we actually use the SEMS system. So what that means, what does it mean to be a part of the SEMS? It means that we use the incident command system. We use ICS on all of our incidents. That's required for agencies who use SIMS. It means that we participate in the Master Mutual Aid Agreement statewide. So if resources are needed in another part of the state, we can participate in sending them there. That we participate in the OA, or the operational area and multi-agency coordination, or MAC, for when large incidents occur. That we use the 5 SEMS functions, that we kind of buy into the whole system. And that when we have incidents, that we have personnel with designated positions with supervision who are able to carry out their responsibilities. So kind of to summarize it, we have the statewide emergency plan, that is the plan for how we deal with disasters in the state. And then we have SEMS, which is the playbook, or how we actually implement that emergency plan based on these principles right here. And these are the 5 principles. They're pretty simple. That everything in the SEMS organization happens at one of these levels, either the field level at scene of an incident, at the local government level, or the city level. Beyond that, the county level, the regional level, and the state level. And it's essentially means that if we get an incident or a disaster locally here on the coast that exceeds our needs or expectations, we can go all the way to the state level to draw in more resources to get the help that we need. And that wouldn't be possible if there wasn't a system in place for disasters. And that's what SEMS really is. So kind of just a way to visualize it is this is what it looks like from the bottom level, being blue on an emergency incident. 99% of the incidents we deal with are dealt with at the field level. We don't go into an organizational level that requires Locally, for our EOC, we have the CEOC, which is the Coastside EOC in Half Moon Bay. And that's an EOC that incorporates both the city of Half Moon Bay to continue functions of the city, as well as the unincorporated areas of the county. Beyond that, we have the county EOC, which is in Redwood City. The county's EOC responsibility not only includes the coast, but all of the city EOCs throughout the county, as well as the unincorporated area. And then we have the regional level EOC for this portion of California, and then the state EOC. And those are the different levels of coordination when a disaster occurs here on the coast. Something to keep in mind with all disasters begin and end at the local level. And that we're seeing that in the southern portion of the county right now with the CZU complex. Really, all of the different levels up to the state level are there to support the local level. But at the end of the day, everything is really begins and ends at the field level. So just to run through them really quick, the field level is our hands-on response. We use incident command. We have to have a command post. We unify our command if there's multiple agencies involved. And if we have an incident on the coast that is exceeding our abilities, we may request that the local EOC be activated. And whether that's a large storm or a mudslide or a fire that goes for an extended amount of time, that is usually a conversation that occurs when we start to see that it's exceeding our capabilities. Then we go to the coastal EOC, and what they really do is they are the coordinating body on the coast for the city, the unincorporated counties, and all of the special districts. They're kind of responsible for the management of the overall response and recovery, and they implement those local emergency plans and SOPs that are here and support the field level activity. If there is something that we need on the coast during a disaster that the Coastside EOC cannot provide, they can take it then to the county and make that request at the higher level. If the county can't meet it, then they can take it up to the regional and state level. So there's always a level above to be able to ask for assistance during a disaster. The EOCs have the big picture in mind. So, it's not uncommon for an EOC to have multiple incidents going. This would be very true in an earthquake situation, or we experienced this summer, we had a fire and a pandemic that the EOC was dealing with. And they are really there to support all of the disasters. They're to support the firefighters, the EMS, the first responders who are out in the field, and they staff based on expertise. So you may get someone from public works in there, someone from fire, someone from the Chamber of Commerce or sanitary. Everyone brings their expertise to the table at the CEOC. And just kind of to break it down, what that might look like at our coastal EOC here is a representative from all of the government agencies would be at the EOC, City of Half Moon Bay, County of San Mateo, CAL FIRE, Sheriff's Office. But there would also be representation from the special districts. So that includes school districts, water districts, harbor district, SAM, which is the JPA for all of the sanitation on the coast. And then there's also a very big and important component to the EOC, which is the volunteer organizations that can be leveraged for their expertise. On the coast, we may see CAPE be leaned on for their coordination there with organizations like Puente and ALAS and the medical reserves. Those are organizations that fall under kind of specialist positions or specialist roles in the EOC, but basically perform a very important function. And a good example of that is the large animal rescue volunteers at this year's CZU fire. That coordination through OES and the EOC is very important to be able to support, obviously, getting large animals out from the evacuation zone. Now, it should be noted EOCs can expand and contract based on the need. So just because we have an emergency doesn't mean all these organizations are going to be in there at once. It's really based on the need of the disaster. And there may also be times when other organizations that we haven't thought would be necessary might need to be there. We might have to pull in a representative from PG&E. We might have to pull in a representative from Verizon. And that's the place to do it, is that EOC level, to be able to provide that support. and help support the incident that's out there that has the issues that they're encountering. With that, I just want to highlight a few of the organizations that it's just a refresher to know what they do. Maybe one of the big ones, and Director Stockman can obviously expand on this, is CAPE, which is the Coastside Emergency Action Program. This organization is under the Chamber of Commerce. It is in the process, if not already being a VoIP, a volunteer organization, and sorry, a VOAD, a volunteer organization. And it really is the ground up, grassroots initiative that on the coast has brought in all of the different stakeholders to the table to interact with each other, to meet each other, to exercise, to share information. And it's really impressive to see what is here on the coast when it comes to this organization. And if you haven't heard, Chief Cosgrave has been selected as the new or the chair of it for this year, for 2020. And it really is a great organization on the coast to bring all of these volunteer organizations together. Another one to know about is the Office of Emergency Services on the OES is a county function. County OES is responsible for basically creating all of the emergency plans at a county level, as well as the local hazard mitigation plans. And they also stand up the EOC at Redwood City and support all of the cities throughout the county. It should be noted that San Mateo County EOC is now no longer a part of the Sheriff's Office. They are a separate entity to the Sheriff's Office who report directly into the County Manager's Office now. And the Sheriff's Office is still at the table in the EOC when there's a deployment. But they're really that unifying body at the county level when it comes to all things emergency management related here in San Mateo County. Just recognize that the city of Half Moon Bay is also responsible for their own continuity of operations and emergency management when a disaster strikes. And they're an important player in the Coastside EOC when there is a disaster. Coastside CERT is a part of CAPE, but it's also a organization that, as you remember, you sponsored as a part of the fire district. And this is probably one of the biggest accomplishments of the coast of the last few years, is just the number of people who are now trained and able to mobilize from a local level for when a disaster strikes. CERT is going to be very important in a disaster to report back from the 32 different neighborhoods what the damage and needs are in those neighborhoods. So when we get a large earthquake that strikes, it's going to be very important for those CERT teams to report back to incident commanders their needs, so that those incident commanders can work with the EOC to place those requests up to the county, the regional, and the state level. So CERT is really that ground level field personnel of the community that is there for a large disaster. Another one to recognize is San Mateo County Large Animal Rescue EVAC. This is a very important organization that a lot of people don't know about. They're vital in getting large animals out, and they're just another example of an organization that you'll find as a part of KEEP, but also as a part of the EOC. And where all these different organizations that we've talked about fit in is they all fit in to the SEMS organization at the Emergency Operations Center. So we typically think about law and fire and public works in the EOC functional areas, but there's everything from care and shelter to logistics to documentation to finance, and there's all specialties throughout the community that are brought together in the EOC to really undertake each of those functions. Now, it's important to remember that SEMS delineates between the field operations, which is where we use ICS, and the EOC operations, which are two distinctly different things. And this up here is really just to highlight the different priorities that are going on concurrently. The field has a set of objectives and priorities that they're working on. The EOC also has a set of objectives and priorities that they're working on to be able to support the field. And that's an important distinction to make so that there's not confusion between the EOC and the field operations. This one is just a very a big chart that shows you based on the level of the disaster, what might be activated. So at the top, you have just basic everyday emergencies in the field. We use ICS. If we get into areas where local government proclaims a disaster and operational EOCs are opened, what activations are required at a local level, at a regional level, and a state level. And that's just for reference for everybody involved as to whether they need to activate at the county level or the local level or the state level. And just to kind of reiterate, as we always say, all disasters are local. Even though we call for emergency support during disasters, the best resource we have are those resources that we have locally. The county level, county EOC really just communicates with all of the different EOCs throughout the county and the cities and tries to process their requests for support by either filling them or getting more support from the state level, or sorry, the region level. And they maintain that operational area for all of San Mateo County. When you get above the county level, you go to the regional level, and this is really where kind of large scale resource sharing occurs. At a regional level, they're really asking for the implementation of the plan that we originally talked about to look at, if we have a widespread earthquake in the Bay Area, what the resource allocation priorities are for where we're going to pull resources from, what resources might be available in different operational and regional areas, and really coordinating between Sacramento, the state level, and the local level at the region level. So it's that intermediary level. They're not controlling anything, but they're definitely the intermediary between the state and the local areas. For us, you can just see here, this is the emergency plan that breaks down the mutual aid regions in California. We're a part of Region 2. That is the coastal region there. The thing to note is just we are in a mutual aid region that goes all the way from basically the Oregon border down to Monterey, so a large geographical region, as opposed to something like Southern California, where LA and Orange County alone are one area. So fairly large mutual aid area that we're a part of. And at the state level, the state is really playing broker between those regional levels, moving resources and seeing if there's resources that can be used when a region has a need. They're also there to provide coordination from a federal response level. So when we're looking for federal assets or we're looking for assets out of state, that's where it's occurring, is at the state level. And they're also that conduit back to the governor's office and the legislators about what might be going on in the ground in Half Moon Bay when it goes to the state level. So just to kind of summarize it all, this is a kind of an example EOC relationship. You have the EOCs at the bottom there. That would be the county EOCs. They report to a regional EOC or a REOC who reports into the state level. So it's just to reiterate that there's a hierarchy and kind of a pecking order when disasters occur. This is probably the best takeaway of all the slides as to how disasters are managed in California from the state level all the way down to the local level. Just a few last as the fire district, we're a part of a few agreements. We have a pretty robust automatic and mutual aid agreement with our cooperators in the county. We have a boundary drop agreement. So if we start to get multiple emergencies here on the coast, dispatch just keeps dumping more and more resources to us until the resources either get tapped out or the incidents are mitigated. We're a part of the master mutual aid agreement at the statewide level. And we're also a part of what's called CFAA, which means that our apparatus can be used on wildland fires and paid for by CAL FIRE or the Forest Service. We also have assistance by hire with the state, which means the state can literally just hire our firefighters and engines at a certain rate from the district. And we also have the agreement with CERT locally that we're sponsors of them for local response. As far as the response phase, which we're a big part of, a couple big takeaways to think about is when an incident happens, there's kind of three things going on concurrently. There's kind of a legislative, bureaucratic agenda going, and that is damage inspections, declaring emergencies at both at the local, county, and state levels to get the ball rolling on funding. And at the same time, we're dealing with the actual response of the disaster, and you'll see that in blue here. And at the same time, we're also dealing with the recovery, and recovery starts almost when the disaster begins as well. So when a disaster strikes, there's kind of three things going on at once: legislatively, response-wise, and recovery-wise. And that's important to realize, because if and when we do get a big disaster, there'll be a lot of different things coming at us that are not just based on response, but they're based on what are we going to do for cleanup, what are we going to do for declaring an emergency locally, and those are all going on concurrently, and they're all equally important. And there are discipline-specific mutual aid systems. So for us here, fire and law, locally is the fire chief. The fire chief can make a request to the operational area coordinator for fire. Right now, that's Ron Myers from North County Fire Authority. He can send additional resources from the operational area to the district, or he can make a request to the regional level for fire resources back to the district as well. This is the case for EMS, fire, law, and other systems, such as those people who are emergency managers. There's something called EMA, which is Emergency Management Mutual Aid. So if some other area in the state needs a mutual aid manager, we can send someone from our county. But it's just an important slide to note, because even though we ask for resources from the local through the EOC, through the regional EOC to the state, there are channels for specific types of resources such as fire, law, EMS, and EMA. And to kind of put it all succinctly, there's resources from the feds all the way down to our neighbors that are available during a disaster. It's just a matter of how we get them. And that's where we follow the SEM system by utilizing incident command, EOCs, and the process. And my final slide is just to kind of give some information about some organizations that we hear about that are not involved in response, but are very much involved in preparedness, mitigation, and recovery. First one is San Mateo County Resource Conservation District, or RCD. That's coming up a lot lately since the fires. And RCD is really there in the fire sense to provide expertise after the fire's gone through. They're working on the programmatic permitting process for how people get the permits in an easier fashion for eucalyptus removal. And they're also the ones that work with Fire Safe on the chipping program on the coast. So they're an important mitigation organization as well as a preparedness organization. There's also Fire Safe San Mateo County. That organization really brings everybody who has an interest, all the stakeholders in the county, together to talk about the priorities for vegetation management at a county level. They also coordinate with the chipper program with RCD. And then there's the Office of Sustainability, and their preparedness and mitigation is really about research and planning, as well as education and outreach. They're looking much further ahead at climate change, at modeling transportation, as well as how we get information about disasters to underserved communities or underrepresented communities. So I know that's a lot of information to throw at you. I'm happy to answer any questions with it. And hopefully it's a decent summary about what we do during a disaster. And
Chief Cox, thank you very much. That's correct. It's an awful lot to digest. There's a lot of information that frankly was helpful to me, but do we have a few questions? Who would like to questions, comments? Bruce.
Yes. Hey, Jonathan. So you mentioned the county's working on getting more permits to eradicate, or not eradicate, cut back and get eucalyptus trees. How about the cypress trees that aren't, the protected trees?
Yeah, so the best that I know of, Bruce, is they're working on a programmatic permitting process that either goes hand in hand with the tree ordinance or is a part of the tree ordinance. to really streamline the ability for people to remove trees. Because the feedback that's been received is people need to be able to remove trees without the barriers that are currently there. So they're working to minimize that process. Not to say that there's not going to still be a process.
Sure.
We're working on it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Questions? Any other questions? Steve?
Yeah, just a quick comment for Chief Cox. You know, you're in a unique position of your personal expertise of working at a state level, and I encourage you to use that wherever you can to support and strengthen the Coastside's ability to have a strong functioning CEOC. I know you do that behind the scenes, but I encourage you in every way, in every meeting, to use that expertise to kind of work with the city and county OES to make sure that thing's going to work when we do have a disaster, with the realization that even with that, it's a challenge. But I think we've been a little bit stagnant, and I think we're in a unique time to where we can influence that. So, and I think that's done through your position. I appreciate that.
Yep. Happy to, Steve. Thank you.
Great. You know, I'd make a couple of quick comments too. You know, what prompted me to ask Chief Cox if he would go over this is I've been getting some text messages from a variety of organizations telling me about, you know, the danger of wind and fire and preparing and all that type of thing. And it's coming from different agencies. Even the Weather Bureau is sending me a text message saying to beware of fire danger and all that. And my concern, and I guess it's maybe some of my background, when I see all the charts and all the flip charts and all the organizations that were displayed this evening, you know, my question is, if when it happens, and it isn't if, when it happens, who's got the baton is going to control it, and that's critical. And Chief Cox, we have a great deal of trust of you and all the organizations that you describe. But for example, the Coastside EOC, when that first was removed from the fire district and placed, I guess, under the direction of the city of Half Moon Bay, there were some practice runs, and in fact, board members were asked to go, and the fire chief and so forth. That was years ago. I haven't heard anything going on, whether there's any practice activities or going on that you know, if a large group of people that you put on the screen were to meet during an emergency at the Coastside EOC, who's in charge? And who decides what's going to happen? Anyway, I won't. That's enough. Chief, I repeat what I guess I said to Chief Sampson. If there's some item that you think, or direction, or policy that the fire district could take that would help the situation, we'd look to you to propose it, and we'd like to discuss and take whatever action is necessary. With that, thank you again.
Thanks.
Okay. Moving on. New business. Election of board officers. We tonight have to elect the president, a vice president, a secretary. Let's start with the president. Do I have a motion?
I nominate Gary Burke to be president. This is JB.
I'll second the motion.
Motion and seconded. Are there any other candidates or motions? If not, roll call, please, Jean. Hello.
Uh-oh.
Where's Jean?
Jean, roll call, please.
You're muted, Gene.
I can't hear. She's,
Jean, you're muted.
you're muted, Jean.
We can't talk.
Chief Cox, why don't you take a roll call, please?
Oh, he's muted too.
Everybody's muted.
Jean will be
I'm
back.
not.
I'm not.
Okay, Bruce, take a roll call.
Director McShane.
No, she's back.
All right, roll call, please, Jean.
Oh, I guess she's not.
I can take it for you. Director McShane,
Yes.
Director McKimmey,
Yes.
Director Stockman,
Yes.
Director Cockrell,
Yes.
President Burke.
Yes. Moving on to, do I have a motion on the vice president? I'll move to for JD Cockrell as vice president.
I'll second that motion.
Moved and seconded. Any other candidates? Roll call, please, chief.
Director McShane,
Yes.
Director McKimmy,
Yes.
Director Stockman,
Yes.
Director Cockrell,
Yes.
President Burke.
Yes. Moving on, I'll make a motion for Director Jenny McShane to be the secretary. I move. Do I have a second? Bruce seconds.
I was second.
Yes. Any other candidates? Roll call, please, chief.
Director McShane,
Yes.
Director McKimmy,
Yes.
Director Stockman,
Yes.
Director Cockrell,
Yes.
President Burke.
Yes. Moving on to the committees, a couple of things. One is that, first of all, we do not have to make choices this evening. And, but I would, Steve, you had mentioned, I believe at last meeting, that you had some thoughts relative to the committees. Is there any ideas or things that you wanted to express on that subject?
I don't have a specific thing that a committee that I think needs to be formed. I think my points came from, and I brought this up with Chief Cox, is, and again, it goes with the theme of the night, is if there's something that he realizes as it relates to the board that would make us more informed by being involved in at a county level or a local level, that my only intention is to make the best use of that time as it relates to committees. So I'm kind of relying on him a little bit. There's nothing specifically from me. What I find is, like, when we talk about the ALS and the committee that Bruce sits on, we see that it doesn't meet often. And I think that's an indication of a lot of things that happen at local county levels, is that they're not really strong functioning groups. So there's not really much to report on. I understand that. So that was all. It's just a time to revisit that. So, and that's what we're doing right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I'd like to, two points. One is, Director McShane has asked to be relieved of the Finance Committee and spend her time on the Vegetation Committee, which is very important, and certainly that'll be a big help in that area as well. But what I'd suggest is that we hold off, and first of all, again, we can make changes anytime we'd like, but there's a few points that I'd like to make on committees, and I'd like to put it back on the agenda for January just to go through it. But Steve's points are well taken. I mean, just to have people go to a meeting that really provides no value to us is a waste of everybody's time. And I'm not trying to just make work for anybody at all. But if there's no objections, let's just move it forward till next month. Bruce, did you speak?
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Gosh,
Excuse me?
Steve, I don't know how long ago it's been since we spoke, but if you want to take over any of the committees that I'm on, please have at and explore.
We were thinking of giving you 3 more committees, Bruce. If that.
Okay.
All right, we'll put it back on the agenda.
All right.
Or
So Steve, take that and
the
run
next-
with it if
the
you
next
want.
month, please.
Whatever.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay.
That was not my intention, but thank you.
I know.
Yeah, okay.
Just for Steve's information.
Moving on to item G. Review and approve the district's response to the San Mateo Grand Jury report on ransomware. Chief Cox.
I'm going to defer to District Council for this.
Yes, good evening, everyone.
Hi, Gene.
Good evening.
have before you a staff report and a draft response to the grand jury's latest report. And this is a report on ransomware and the risk that all public and private organizations are operating under with regard to the ransomware attacks. The grand jury made a number of findings which are attached to your staff report as attachment 2. They break down into 3 particular areas. Findings regarding the threats that all agencies operate under for ransomware attacks. the importance of assessing those risks and taking preventative action, and training for your employees. The response that we have prepared that we ask you to take a look at tonight agrees with all of the findings made by the grand jury and also agrees to implement their recommendations. And that is to have your IT people take a look at your system and then to make a report back to staff, which should then be transferred to you as a board. That may come as a confidential document because there may be material in there that is more appropriately shared in a confidential document. And then to follow up if necessary with federal resources what could be available to help in hardening your cyber system. So with all that said, we are asking for your approval of the draft response to the grand jury's report, which the chief will then submit. Thank you.
Just to get it going, I will make a motion that the board approve the draft report to the Honorable Danny Y. Chow, Judge of the Superior Court. The draft report is in our packet, and I move that we approve that and submit it. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Discussion? Questions?
You know, a lot of
Roll
this,
call, please. I'm not sure. Jean, are you on? She's not. Chief Cox, please. Roll
Director
call.
McShane. Director McShane,
Yes.
Director McKimmey,
Yes.
Director Stockman,
Yes.
Director Cockrell,
yes,
President Burke.
Yes.
Thank
Moving
you.
on to item
Thanks,
H.
Gene.
Moving on to item H, discuss hiring a certified access specialist to perform report study on Fire Station 41. Director McKinney.
So it became aware to me that this inspection it's an ADA compliant inspection. So I brought it up to Chief Cox and I checked with John Rydell. So it said I'm advised to take this inspection, $1,500, $2,000, so that it doesn't stop anybody from suing the district if they find some non-compliant ADA non-compliance issues with our new station. So our new station, I think, will be completely available to public. So if, like I talked to Jonathan about, if we'd have had the open house, there would have been people everywhere. So they would have all had access to the entire station. In the event of emergency, we would have people sleeping in the app bay and have access to the entire station. John Rydell has suggested that possibly, since we put tile in all the bathrooms, that everything has been lowered, so to speak, by adding to the bottom, we're going to miss it by ½ an inch. Whether or not we'll get called on that, he thinks we can survive with one bathroom ADA compliant, and that's all we would need. And so we would take those ADA compliant signs off every other bathroom. But for me, I feel anything we can put up to put another hurdle for any individual or company or whatever that's going to come in and assess our building for ADA compliance would be a benefit to our district.
I'll make a motion that we hire a certified access specialist to perform a report study on Fire Station 41. Do I have a second?
second.
Yes.
Discussion. I'm sorry. JB?
Well, my only comment was there seems to be somebody who makes a living finding things that are not ADA compliant and suing. And I think he does quite well at it. And this would avoid that from happening to us. We don't need
My question, is there a need to do it for our other facilities, the other stations, or should it be just specific to 41?
Good question.
Jonathan, was it done at 58?
It was done at 58, yeah. It's typically done on newer construction, Steve.
Okay,
The project wraps up.
gotcha.
For for a small amount of money, it seems like a great insurance investment that might save us a lot of money in the future, is my view of the thing. That we may
Yeah,
never
Mine
need
too.
it. Yeah.
What, this is JB, what would the difference in cost be to have him do a survey of all 3 stations to bring up what Steve was saying? That might be money well spent to you know, add on to the contract to.
Or
survey.
do you put yourself in a more liable position to say
Yeah,
for
that's-
sure it's so
that would be
dated
my-
that you say, hey, you knew this needed done and you haven't done it? Is it?
Let's,
There's that
I'd
consideration.
suggest let's do it with 41 and see what happens,
Okay.
and we'll take a look at it. Roll call, please, Chief.
All right, Director McShane,
Yes.
Director McKimmy,
Yes.
Director Stockman,
Yes.
Director Cockrell,
Yes,
and President Burke.
Yes. Item I, review and discuss and approve a resolution to award a contract for landscaping services at Fire Station 41. Chief Cox.
Yeah, so this is really the result of an RFP for maintaining all of the landscaping that we have installed at Station 41. This includes everything that's listed on there, from the weed removal, keeping stuff trimmed, removing graffiti, and all those things that a would do. One thing that has come up with some community members is concern about any chemical they spray to reduce the weeds that are growing. We have gone back and forth with this vendor and come to an agreement to use organic material sprays only, nothing that's toxic. It will require additional applications, but we're not going to spray anything that is going to have adverse health effects on it. So this contract is really just to award the maintenance of that landscaping, and I'll note that it is a local company that actually also did the installation of the landscaping, so they know it well.
To get it going, I make a motion that we approve the resolution to award a contract for landscaping services at Fire Station 41 to, what is the name of the company?
Scape.
Landscaping for a fee of $6,000 a year, $500 a month. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Discussion.
I would just quickly, you, as often happens with landscape contracts, is just, I hope they keep that as nice as it can be. What happens, you see in, like, whether it's a strip mall or a commercial complex, you know, there's stuff growing, but it doesn't look good. So I hope, especially with a new facility, that they, you know, that it's not just a blow and go, you know, come in and mow it and cut it and away you go, that they take care of that facility. So that's my only comment.
Very
So-
good.
so we're looking at $500 a month then for, $500 a month for the 12 months. Okay, fair enough.
Bruce?
So Scapes, Steve, is located on Highway 92.
Right.
So any bad mouthing from us would create a big thing for them, I think. So
Yeah.
I would hope they would take care of us, and they
Yeah.
have so far. So
Yeah, great. Good to hear. Thank you.
right on.
No more discussion. Roll call, please, Chief.
Director McShane,
Yes.
Director McKimmy,
Yes.
Director Stockman,
Yes.
Director Cockrell,
Yes,
President Burke.
Yes. Moving on to Directors in Chief report, Finance Committee. There was no Finance Committee meeting, but in our packet is the spreadsheet of all the expenses and revenue for the first third of the year. I reviewed it. There is really nothing outstanding or notable in here. Our LAIF reserves are 10.3 million. Our operating reserves are 2 million. We're on track to have a positive fund balance for the fiscal year. And the salaries and budgets certainly will not exceed the 75%, which is our goal. And so there's simply nothing unusual to report, unless there's any questions. Ginny, did you have any comments?
No, I looked at things.
Any questions? By the way, one other item I'd mention is that when you look at this, if you look at the totals, you'll notice that the total revenue is considerably less than the expenses planned. but included in that is a new fire engine for a capital expense. So it makes, just to make sure you understand it. Moving on. Volunteer committee report, Director Cockrell.
Yeah, they didn't have a volunteer meeting this month, so no report.
Okay. Land and Structures Committee, Director Cockrell, Director Stockman.
I would call us doing anything except the bringing of Station 41 on board, which we didn't do that either.
Yeah. Bruce?
Yeah, so the other day I walked New 41, and there's still a lot to do on the punch list. Is there gonna, I hope we don't pay any more money to Falk Construction. I'm talking zero, because then we won't get any leverage. Is there a plan to walk the site again, Jonathan?
Yeah, there is. So they had indicated that they'd like to come back towards the end of the month. So we've been throwing some dates, Jeff and Dave out there to get it, and I'll make sure you're there when that happens. And we'll
awesome. But so I walked it, and so I did not go inside because I didn't want to bother the crew. But the list remains the same for me. You know, all the concrete needs to be cleaned. There's still gaps in the siding. There's still, you know, nail holes that need to be filled. There's still dents in the gutters. There's still a lot to be done, and I don't see it getting done. That's why I do not want to pay them a penny more, because otherwise we would lose our leverage. And they would, what do we owe them, 600,000?
Yeah, and the thing to remember too is we will work with Kai and come up with a list of things that we are not taking delivery on. So we always have that.
Right. But I'm just saying, if we pay them any more money, they can walk and still have a giant profit.
Right.
So I just want all the leverage we can get.
Did we not hire an attorney to deal with some of these issues?
Yes, but we have not called, it's my understanding that we have not called upon them to
Correct.
Act. At some point.
Yeah, and hopefully we won't.
Well, I was thinking sometimes just a letter from an attorney has a way of building a fire under people and getting things moving.
And let's for my opinion, let's wait on that until we really need to use it. Let's walk the property again and point out to these things. And like I said, let's not pay them another dime.
Chief Cox, I know you're on top of this, so please continue to inspect to make sure it happens. And once again, Bruce, thank you for your
thanks, Bruce.
great effort on
My
our
pleasure.
behalf. It's been very, very helpful. Thank you very much.
And Jonathan, if you ever want to walk it with me before we do that final walkthrough, I'd be happy to do so.
Sounds good, Bruce.
All right, thank you. Keep me posted.
Yep.
Thank you. Vegetation Management, Director McShane.
Well, that's something I'm going to sink my teeth into, and I'm going to work with anybody who wants to meet with me. Actually, I have a list of people I can call, and also Chief Simpson will be helping me.
Okay, and we'll go over some of that next month as we discuss the committees as well. Special District Association. Bruce?
Oh, no meeting, no report. No,
Okay. ALSJPA, Director McKinney, no meeting.
Correct, same.
Emergency Preparedness, Director Stockman, please.
Yes, I'm going to keep this very brief. I'll start with just thanking Chief Cox has been present on the Zoom meetings for the KEEP group over the last 2 months, and just your presence there helps legitimize the volunteer process on the coast, and I appreciate that. The whole community does. Chief Cox brought up that there was elected of new officers for that KEEP group, and that's very important. Sharice McHugh has been leading it over the last, 8 or 10 years. And this shift will be, I think, important to its growth. One, so the elected positions were Dave Cosgrave. As he retires, he'll move into that position as the chair, with Chrislyn Geit, who is the head of Chamber of Commerce now, is very important as the vice chair. She brings that continuity of the Chamber of Commerce and representing the businesses of the coast. And then The secretary was Neil Patton. And for those of you who don't know him, Neil's from South County and down in the Pescadero area. So it kind of, as it relates to CERT and the whole Coastside, it brings more representation. A lot of times the South County skyline area gets left out of the conversation or the leadership. And so that's good to have him in that position. And also they updated the bylaws, which was of KEEP, which was helpful in getting that movement forward. And then there was great discussion on the VOAD part of KEEP, which is a volunteer organization active in disasters, and what needed to be done to whether or not that was necessary for the group, and whether what was needed to make it functioning. So, and with that, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Attorney's report.
No report, but I'd like to wish you all a very healthy and happy new year.
Thank you, Jane. Fire chief's report.
Yeah, just a few things. First of all, COVID, as everyone knows, resurgence countywide. We are taking precautions, even more so in the agency. As you can imagine, as a department statewide, we've seen our numbers within the ranks go up. So we're doing all we can to ensure that we both isolate people and quarantine them. And I have to say, hats off to our Battalion Chief Ken Lord here on the coast, who's been working tirelessly with Dr. Gilbert at the county level to really make sure that our crews are taking the precautions and responding as needed. The grant equipment that we received with all the other fire agencies for PPE for the COVID is starting to roll in. It's a lot, which is good. We're just looking for a place to store it now, so that's a good problem to have.
Yes.
Administratively, you've probably seen the office upgrades here at administration are finishing up, and we're happy with that. The last piece of that is just finalizing the conference room to be a little bit more professional, in the hopes that one day you'll be able to use it again. That's in the works. I did a presentation for the Mid-Coast Council, really talking about, a little bit what Rich touched on, and more so on evacuation during a disaster. And then we did get notified that we have received, again, the District of Distinction. So
Cool.
that,
Whoa, terrific.
yeah,
Wonderful.
we're hoping to get the certificate presented to us and everything that goes along with that, but I was excited that we got it. As far as personnel, Chief Larkin conducted interviews for the Division Chief of Operations today. Hopefully we'll have an announcement on that in the near future. The staff analyst for the front office, I completed the interview packet today, so that should be posting shortly. And thirdly, Clinton Dyer, who's been an engineer here on the coast, working at 41 and 44, will be promoted on Monday into the fire marshal's office to work with John Riddell.
Cool.
All that depth in there. So a good asset to the team. Very smart individual who we're excited to have in there.
Awesome.
As far as operations goes, a pretty average call volume. One thing was a cliff rescue last week, just south of the tunnel, for a female who fell down the side. She did survive when she got to the top. I don't know her condition when she got to hospital. The sheriff's department used a drone. It was one of the first times we've seen a drone.
Cool.
I have to say that's a great use of their skill set and their people on those incidents. So I hope that continues. And they work, even though there were 2 helicopters on it, both a CHP helicopter and a Coastside helicopter, but we still have to use the drone. You'll notice if you come to Station 40, they're closing the intersection here at Main Street and Highway 1 for the reconfiguration. You'll need to come in on either Seymour. Seymour's probably the best one. Our apparatus at Station 40 is now responding out of the back gate because they have to go north to be able to go south now. And that is anticipated to last for about 3 months. Also at Station 40, the new set of auto extrication equipment that we purchased has arrived. It's all electric now. So it's battery powered electrical jaws of life, essentially. There's a auto extrication class being taught here at Station 40 this week, and they're practicing on those new tools. We completed a truck academy, a 2-week truck academy earlier in the month, earlier in November here at Station 40, and we're still planning on our volunteer academy in the spring. Just in the prevention office itself, you'll notice if you do go in there, they made the transition this week to the full one-hole walls and 80-inch monitor where they can actually do all of their digital plan reviews on a screen, a touch screen where they can zoom in and out and make markings. So I know that was a strategic objective in the plan this year that's been executed. And they're also working on getting the letter out for self-certification for inspections because of the COVID restrictions. CERT is continuing to do well. Chief Cosgrave has been working on tying up the loose ends on the reimbursement for the grants. And then obviously we have the Station 41 final items that we need to finish up getting addressed and working with Bruce on that. I am still waiting for the appraisal for the old 41. As you remember, we signed the contract with Fabro. He knew he was busy going into it. I think with the current conditions going on and what's going on in the real estate world, he said he's just delayed. So I'll keep on him and report back when we can get that. The sooner the better. And as we talked about, just for our radar, the fuel vault at 44, we're going to have to replace because it is out of service due to rust and water's getting into the fuel. So that purchase we hope to make in the next month. And we'll also be working on that RFP for the exterior painting at Fire Station 40 as well. As far as apparatus is concerned, Captain Stein continues to work with Pierce on the next fire engine. The utility vehicles and battalion chief vehicles that were approved last year are starting to come in and be outfitted, should be going in service over the next few months. And we have finished our AVL, the iPad installation with the Cradle Point automatic vehicle location to comply with the new county dispatch standards. So that should be online January 27th. With that, end of report.
Questions, Bruce?
Yes, I have 3 questions. Jonathan,
Yep.
so the CAL FIRE drone program was going into effect. What has become of that?
Yep, the drone program. How much time do you have?
We put, I think, $35,000 into a pool or a kitty or whatever you want to call it, into an account for a drone. So take it away in a short version.
Yes, we have not.
Jonathan, I'll take that one if you want.
Yep, that's fine.
I just got notified on Tuesday that CAL FIRE has received their COA, which is their certificate of authorization to operate drones statewide. So we had gotten a COA for the district a couple years ago, and because the state had not finished their process, they held us up from giving us authority to do it locally at the unit. So that process is moving forward, and I think Chief Cox can probably give you some more details on where training is when it comes to that. But we just got notified Tuesday that the statewide COA has been approved.
Yeah, that was a big administrative hurdle. The reason I kind of shrugged Director McKimmey is the purchasing regulations for drones. Any drone that has any part that's made in China is not allowed to be purchased through a grant through the federal government.
Perfect.
And DJI and a majority of the big drone makers making components or making the entire drone in China, it's really brought the countywide drone project to a screeching halt. So I've been in contact with Dave Pucci, the fire chief from Redwood City. Redwood City, as you remember, is leading the grant. They're the grant recipient and we're an add-on. Once we get the green light to purchase something, now that we have a COA in place, we'll be able to go full throttle, but it's the bureaucratic kind of juggling going on.
Perfect answer. Thank you.
Thank you,
So
Chief.
we're making progress, which is good. So
Questions? Any questions for the chief?
my second question out of
Oh,
3.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's all right. What will happen to the old extrication equipment from Station 40?
Yeah, so that'll follow the normal surplusing process.
Okay.
And that'll be brought forward. The decision we have to make before we do that is whether we want to keep it on the reserve engine for the volunteer habitat.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense. And my third question out of 3, is there any chance, or is it beyond safety wise, we could get a keypad on the back door by the apparatus space so we don't have to bother everybody when we're like coming to get a board packet or?
At Station 40 at the training room?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, we can make that happen.
Okay. I mean, if there's some law or rules or regulations where it can happen, that's fine with me. I just, every time those guys got to get up and they come out to the front door and, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll
Awesome.
get that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you. No more questions.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, I have just a couple of quick comments. First of all, we get in our packet every month the monthly statistics that you're all familiar with, and we've really not discussed any of that for a long period of time. At one time, not too many years ago, this document was the subject of a knockdown, drag-out fight each month on what was happening and so forth. But I just would point out that the shoot times and the average response times in the district have just been outstanding. And I think it's worthwhile noting and thank the Chief Cox and all CAL FIRE people for making that happen. Just a great job in that regard. The second point I'd make is that I'd just like to thank Chief Larkin, Chief Cox, and all the other folks who put together the visual opening of Station 41. That was not, what we would like to have had happen, obviously, and all that, but it was very professionally done and well prepared, and everything went off just great. So, again, thank you very much for doing that. The third item on my list, Chief, I'd like to ask you for the January meeting if you would put on review, discuss, and possibly update the strategic plan. And the reason I'm asking it at this meeting is just to give the board members opportunity to think of what kind of major strategic items that might be appropriate to discuss and possibly put on a plan that needs to be updated. So with the packet, Chief, hopefully will send out the old strategic plan, and then we'll discuss what might go on and all that type of thing. And when Chief earlier just mentioned we got the District of Distinction, reminded me that I recall sometime around the first of this year when I first met with Chief Cox, I had mentioned that there were 3 things that were, I thought, probably one of the key items. That one was, of course, completing Station 41. The second one was getting the District of Distinction again for us. And the third was, finding land for Station 44. And because of on the third item, certainly the delay in getting appraisals and all that has held us back and all of that. But certainly has accomplished the first 2 flying colors, for which we're very much appreciated. Anything else that anybody has to add or comment? With that, go ahead, JB.
Yeah, I had some questions about these reports. I'm reading it now. A structure fire, I get that, but there's a fire unspecified. It looks like since January, 26 of those. And the other question I have is, what is a landscape fire?
Great questions and great observation skills there. So the first part of that, a fire unspecified, is someone calls 911 and says, I see a fire. And the dispatcher says, well, is it a structure? Is it a vegetation? They go, I don't know. I can't tell what it is. It's just a fire. Then they'll send it as a fire type unknown. A landscape fire is really what we consider a cigarette out the side of the window, gets in some bark or mulch and starts to smolder, or a homeless encampment where they've had a cooking fire and it's in the grass. Those are considered landscape fires. It's a level below grass fire, basically.
Okay, so brush fire would be an unspecified one, or would be a
Brush fire, a wildland fire is all wildland fires are categorized as grass fire, which is a very confusing thing.
okay. And I didn't have any comments on the very nice decorations in front of our house. I'm disappointed.
Well, I was gonna ask you, JB, are you cold out there?
Yes,
The hair's
Okay,
standing up on your head.
well, it's painful to conclude this meeting in Christmas without Jean's cookies, but I'm afraid we're gonna have to do it for a while. And with that, just wish Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to everybody. Good evening, have a nice evening. Bruce, I'm sorry.
Jonathan.
Gene had either a question or a comment. Gene, we can't hear you. Oh, you're saying goodbye.
Merry Christmas, Gene.
All right, good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Merry Christmas.
Good night.
Good night.
Leave.